barn burner, courtesy of Bloomberg. We had a story earlier this week. It's looking into the alleged inner workings at Mar-a-Lago, preparing for Trump's hopeful second term. The headline was that Trump has allegedly ruled out Vivek as a vice presidential pick, might want him as DHS secretary instead. But us and others noticed further in the article a possible red flag. Apparently, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is seen as a top candidate to be Trump's chief of staff in a second term. And so the natural question is what to make of this. Is this a red flag? And if it is, how big a one?
And there were other potential picks, I think, that were also entertained, right? Like Vivek for DHS secretary.
Yeah, Vivek for DHS. It says like Elise Stefanik is not a favorite for vice president anymore, but he likes her for an unnamed cabinet job. It says he'd like to bring Ben Carson back. Not clear what job it would be, but he liked him as a cabinet secretary last time, so could bring him back. So
let me ask Tyler this politically, Tyler, do you think this sort of a leak, whether true or not, is attempted to try to deter base support for Trump, that it's going to be just kind of a personnel issue if Trump were to win another term?
Yeah, and that's the way I read it, was that like nefarious people and other people who just like want to find some way to kind of bridge gaps with Kevin McCarthy tried to leak this just to create havoc, within the conservative base. Right now, I think the conservative base is consolidating earlier and faster and better than anyone could have anticipated. And so the media and other nefarious characters are trying to find ways to create splits.
Yeah, the base does not like Kevin McCarthy, but
But the base wouldn't have liked Reince Priebus last time either.
But they didn't know Reince.
But as a chief of staff, what about Kevin McCarthy would bother you the most?
I just think what you're going to want in a chief of staff, it seems the reason, first, let's get the reason Trump wants McCarthy, which I think is Trump likes the idea of himself as this big deal maker. He sees deals as Congress produces legislation that he can sign.
And you negotiate.
And you negotiate this. And so it basically, McCarthy was in Congress, was a speaker, has relationships with all these members of Congress. He can hammer out legislation. Trump signs it, gets on stage, says, we made these deals. We've made all these deals on stuff. It's great. I think what we want in a chief, and I think what Trump could easily appreciate in a chief, is you want an administrator, you want an enforcer, you want a details guy who's going to think, okay, what do we actually want to get done with all these different executive departments? What can we do by executive order? How can we achieve Donald Trump's agenda with the presumption that Congress is going to be hostile and slow and not do the things that you campaigned on? And that's the kind of person that you want. I don't necessarily say you want to pick a businessman, but you kind of want the sort of CEO, the word that's coming to mind is dictator. We don't want a dictatorship, but like literally a guy who's going to view the executive branch as something, as a weapon to be used for your political agenda.
But let me ask you a question. Do you think Kevin McCarthy would be better than like John Kelly?
I don't know if he would. John Kelly, of course, it ended badly with Trump in a lot of ways, but John Kelly was an improvement over Reince Priebus in terms of...
Do you think you need an ideological chief of staff, or do you want someone who really knows how to work D.C.? I'm not making the case for McCarthy, but I actually don't think it's the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
I think you want either an ideologue or a person who is so committed to just being an effective chief of staff that they execute on that MAGA ideology, even if they don't personally hold to it. Like they just want to be seen as this super effective Trump enabling chief of staff. But I think ideology is something that you would want. And if you just want someone who's going to do what's easiest, and if they're moderate by disposition, they'll do what we had too much of in 2017. They'll just say, hey, Congress, pass whatever you want, and Trump will sign it because he wants to be able to sign legislation and say it was a great deal. And then we'll get amnesty, we'll get tax cuts on things that we don't want tax cuts on, we'll get, all this China enabling stuff. We'll get uniparty stuff. And that's not what we want.
Well,
okay, go ahead.
Well, I just want to throw this out there, Charlie. So there's a couple of things that are out on that everyone needs to be aware of. So you have Project 2025, which has been covered a lot in the media, which is the Heritage Run, working with all the conservative groups on preparing the foundation
The next
for the
administration.
So it seems like a chief of staff would need to really jive with that group, right? And I don't see Kevin McCarthy really being totally in sync with that, although I don't think there's,
No, I hear you on that.
anti-McCarthy
I just
people.
don't think it's the worst. I mean, he was Speaker of the House. I mean, that.
I'm just saying, if they do all this work ahead of time, they're probably going to lobby for somebody that's going to be like in line. And I don't think McCarthy's probably the top pick out of that group, and AFPI either. I will tell you someone that I think
Brooke
that would.
Rollins is going to be a front runner.
So Brooke, but who else?
Russ Vogt,
Somebody else?
Kevin Roberts from Heritage.
Close?
Trying
No,
to think of not Meadows or.
I would suggest this, Lee Zeldin.
Oh, that's interesting.
So Lee's super involved with these groups, super involved, the AFPI, which is Trump's.
And he still has the Congress angle.
And he has the Congress angle, which is, you need that. Like you're saying, Charlie, you need somebody that's an insider that understands what's going on. Lee gets that, and I think that he's respected enough by
I think
angles.
Zeldin is a terrific idea. So Jack, I want to get your opinion here. Again, I always got along with Kevin. He treated our Turning Point USA students so well on the Hill. So I just, considering how I was not treated always great by White House chief of staffs, I selfishly am like, hey, if Kevin was chief of staff, I actually think that'd be kind of great for Turning Point USA. I'm just being very transparent.
Yeah.
Because, right, Tyler, he brought our student body presidents and treated them like rock stars.
No,
and that was great. So I just want to, I want to make sure we're clear on Kevin.
The ideological differences, the thing I've always told people, I disagree with Kevin McCarthy on a lot of things, right? Like on his stances ideologically. I appreciate when people are honest ideologues. When he's
not ideological. He doesn't have deeply held.
Well,
beliefs.
I mean, he's a moderate, right? So he's an honest moderate. So versus we sometimes have dishonest moderates who pretend to be conservative, who are actually moderates. Kevin McCarthy's always been, I'm a moderate. This is who I am. And like I'll work with you on X, Y, and Z. We also have conservatives who actually turn out to be moderates. So or people who pretend to be conservatives who turn out to be moderates. I prefer an honest moderate over a dishonest conservative.
I agree. So, Jack, sorry, it's hard. We keep talking over you. Your thoughts, Jack?
Yeah. So, kind of echoing what you say, I think that Kevin was great in terms of the way that he was able to be open with TPUSA. I think that he was very open with a lot of people in the conservative movement, and certainly on the MAGA side of the house. I agree with what Tyler's saying about his stance on a lot of the issues. I guess my one concern, though, regarding that specifically, and why I would say Lee Zeldin ahead of McCarthy for chief of staff, is that with Zeldin, you have this situation where people, I think everybody on all sides of the Republican Party has a lot of goodwill, or I should say Zeldin has a lot of goodwill with them. Whereas with Kevin, I feel like you risk kind of reigniting the entire rift that led to him being pushed out as speaker to begin with. And I'm not saying that he isn't qualified or anything like that. I'm just saying that it feels like it would reignite a lot of the things that have kind of simmered down since then.
Yeah, just the best example would be someone who is like the unknown CEO of a mid-major publicly traded company that took it from good to great.
Yeah, and you
know
want
what I
it
mean?
because what's the problem we had so much in the first Trump administration? You do an executive order, and then the staff would just not do it. We've had James Bacon on the show, and he talked about this. You have those executive personnel parasites. They slow play everything. They ignore things. They misinterpret your orders. I feel like you want a chief of staff who's going to be tracking those things, and he follows up on it. Not 2 months later, not 2 years later, but 2 days later, 2 weeks later, says, why didn't you do this? Oh, you're ignoring it? You're fired.
I think Vivek would be perfect. I think the only problem is Vivek wants to be president too bad, to be chief of staff. And by the way, that's not like a negative. He literally ran for president.
Yeah, so I feel like
you want a chief of staff who does not want to be president.
I think you want a guy who recedes into the background. I mean, how many things do you remember Joe Biden's chief of staff doing?
Ron Klain is mentioned the least of any chief of staff ever. That's why Rahm Emanuel didn't work out, by the way.
As disastrous as their presidency is, they do a lot of things. Someone's organizing all those lawsuits against Elon Musk. Someone's organizing...
You know who would be a good archetype is Tim Cook. So Tim Cook...
Tim Apple?
Yes, Tim Apple. Tim Apple. Now, again, Tim Apple, he de-celebritized Apple successfully. Apple was a little bit of like the Steve Jobs celebrity cult while he was alive. Would you agree?
Yeah.
It was like, this was Steve Jobs, Apple. And Tim Cook, I definitely, like, he's the opposite of Elon Musk. He doesn't like the attention. He keeps his head down. He delivers. Apple is more valuable than ever before. I kind of like the Tim Cook archetype where it's just like, I'm just going to show up at 6 a.m. Yes, sir. Going to fulfill your agenda. Tell you if I agree or disagree.
And
but you also
then their
need to,
life doesn't revolve around media cycles.
No, that's what I'm
you
saying,
want a
though.
guy who just is not, the press is going to freak out. They're going to do hit pieces.
You
and
need
he'll
someone.
just...
The new White House chief of staff should be like, you're never doing an interview.